Ladies, gentlemen, am I often forgotten, but certainly not by me, Ripper Demons. Welcome to the channel and welcome to another guide. In this guide, we're going to be taking a look at budget solos with magic at hard mode Kerapac. There's no thrills, no tricks, just straight up normal budget gear and just sending it on some rotations. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into this guide. So taking a quick look at the inventory and the worn equipment, this is a pretty straightforward bare bones preset. We have subjugation here. I do have pretty good perks on here. Perks like C4R5 and Impatient 4 with a mobile combo are pretty cheap to go for. The only expensive perk on here is Biting 4. However, it's not too terribly expensive. Right now with Necromancy around the corner, they're definitely kind of inflated right now, the Noxus weapons that is. But typically speaking, Biting 4 is not too expensive of a perk to go for. Plus, the reason all these perks are on this armor is that when you go ahead and buy your Tectonic or even your Elite Tech, you can just disassemble this armor, you get the components back from it, and you get all your gizmos back. So in my opinion, if you can afford the better perks, definitely go for them. However, they're not the absolute end of the world. Blast Diffusion Boots are just to make Detonate better. Detonate's a very strong ability, highly worthwhile, and I think these are only about 1.5 mil at the time of recording. Cinderbanes are here and they can be expensive for a glove swap. However, it seems like pretty much everyone I know has Cinderbanes because they're pretty useful in just all forms of combat, and most people seem to be willing to invest a little bit into their glove slot if it works for all combat styles. And at Kerapac, that is no exception because Weapon Poison does work here. The dual-wield weapons just have budget perks on them. If you can afford the advanced perks like Aftershock 4 Now, if you can afford the advanced perks like P6AS1 and Aftershock 4 equal 2 for your main hand offhand, the same concept applies. You can just disassemble these later for the gizmos back, or if you really want to equipment separate them, because these items aren't too expensive in the grand scheme of things. However, I just have Precise 6 equal 4 on here to show that you don't need the advanced weapon perks. Scripture of When is just a overall good pocket slot to have until you get a Grim. If you have a Grim, that would be even better. However, this is going to work just fine. I believe they're about 80 mil right now and the pages are pretty cheap, so it's definitely a budget option for y'all to use. Now, I do have a Channeler's Ring and I do have the enchantment on here. This is probably the most expensive worn equipment item here. However, it is currently a best in slot item as far as Magic Camp is concerned, so getting this out of the way early definitely is going to be helpful. It buffs G-Conk to the moon and back, and you will still be using this when you get into the top tiers of Magic. The EOF just has a Gothic staff in it. You don't need the ornament kit if you don't have it. The ornament kit just adds 3 magic bonus. It's not the end of the world if you have it or not, but if you have the spare GP lying around, definitely go for it. And yes, I do have the hybrid Zuck cape here. This is just the one that I have. If you have the magic only version, that one is going to work just fine. We are just looking to get the buffed Omni power. And of course, Mani Aura is pretty much going to be the gold standard for anything budget because the more damage, the better. And as far as the inventory is concerned, the only real switch I have is a shield. That's it. There's really nothing special to this preset as far as switches are concerned. The shield has Turtling 4 on it, but we won't be using it for that. We're just going to be using it to get full value reses instead of a defender, which is only going to give half value. And other than that, it is just brews and blubbers. I do have these in equal portions, so you get 3 eats out of 1 blubber, and then you get 6 eats out of a Saradomin brew. So if you're same ticking your food like you should be, where you press your food keybind and then your Sara brew in the same game tick, then you will be using 2 blubbers per flask. And this obviously also works for if you're using super brews or super Guthix rest or just normal Guthix rests. The spiritual prayers are just to buff the Ripper demon, and the nice thing about using a Ripper is you don't have to worry about prayer at all when using spirituals. You just stare at the familiar spec bar down here, or the spell points, whatever you want to call it, and anytime this is low, you just drink a couple sips of your spiritual prayer, and your prayer will never run out if doing this correctly. The portents of restoration here are just a nice additional heal. These proc automatically once you go below half HP, and and they're pretty strong to keep in some spare inventory spots if you have them. And as you can see, this preset is wide open for interpretation. There's a lot of food in here, there's some spirituals, and you have quite a few slots to just toss in some miscellaneous items. So portents are definitely a strong add. There is a cooldown, so you can't just like fill your entire inventory with them. You do need some consumable food to get you up higher in HP for these to proc again. However, they're a very nice addition to any preset. The Vit Pot is here just for P4. I'll show y'all how that works and I'll call it out as we get there. The expensive spices just boost the per eat heal on your blubbers from 750 to 800. And so when you're learning the boss, it makes it a little bit easier because you're getting a little bit more HP per heal rather than healing over time, which can make P4 a little bit easier. Vuln bombs are pretty self-explanatory. You want all the additional damage that you can get. And my rune pouches just kind of follow the standard layout at this point. Just feel free to pause on screen if you need to see those. I do have Elder Overloads in here. I believe they're 107 herb lore, and the Adrenaline Renewals I believe are 115 herb lore, but there are some pretty cheap and effective ways, especially around double XP times, to get herb lore very high very quickly, and there's many buffs in game to help you with this, with like the pulse core buff, so you don't actually need the entire level just to make a few of these. And plus I believe there's some metas where if you make Vuln bombs on double XP and then sell them afterwards, you can even get some profit out of them. But overall, herb lore isn't the expensive monster of a skill that it once was, so definitely work towards getting Adrenaline Renewals. If you don't have renewals, it's not the end of the world, just use Super Replens or something like that. And that's about it as far as the preset is concerned. Now real quickly, I'll just go over what I use in my bank preset. I do go ahead and use Quarm, Lantidime, and Spirit Weed Incense. This is the one time where Spirit Weed Incense plus the Summoning Renewal is actually going to be helpful because we're using Ripper Demon, which is spamming the heck out of this bar, pretty much leaving it on 0 all the time. So any sort of passive effect that we can have active to help with special point recovery is going to be very helpful indeed. Now as a cost-saving measure, you could go ahead and skip the Powder of Penance because you are going to be spamming spirituals, but if you want the peace of mind of spamming your spirituals out too early by the end of the kill and you don't have any and you just want that peace of mind, you don't have to worry about prayer points, you can go ahead and use them if you want. However, they are kind of expensive. It's about $1 mil an hour, so the choice is definitely up to you. And you're going to obviously be using Ripper Demon with these scrolls, and I do just set the auto cast on 1, so that way it's firing as fast as possible. And other than that, I just use a Ogre Flask with the Thermal Bath in it. You can make up to 5 flasks a day, and each flask is, I believe, 6 hours of combat. They do last over an hour, so 1 daily run and you have 30 hours of PVM. If you don't want to make these, I believe the Anachronia Bath works as well, so feel free to use whichever you have. And I do go ahead and sip Weapon Poison Triple Plus. I just have them broken down into 1 doses in my preset as well as my Summoning Renewals, so that way after every kill I just load up the bank preset, click these 2 potions, and sometimes I overload from the bank, sometimes I don't, and then I can get back onto my next kill. So the relic setup I am using here is Death Ward, Conservation of Energy, and Fury the Small. I have this set here for people who are more or less wanting to learn the boss and might be a little bit scared of it at first. Death Ward really works nicely, especially on P4 when dealing with some of the bigger autos. It can just help out in a pinch and bring the overall stress levels down a smidge. And Fury the Small is nice for dual wield camping, however it's not 100% necessary. And once you get more comfortable, you can easily swap over to having Berserker Fury in your first slot, and then something like Font of Life in the third one for a little bit of an overall health buff. But Berserker's Fury is definitely nice for the damage increase. And for these example kills, that's what I'm going to end up running. I'll be running Zerk Fury with Font of Life, just to show that you don't need Death Ward to do it. But if you're wanting to learn this boss, this relic setup is more than fine. So we will go ahead and get these swapped over, and we will go ahead and start the example kills. So this is just a quick editor's note here. I forgot to mention that I am using the Pontifex Shadow Ring passive effect. Basically, I just have the top Pontifex Shadow Ring, and you turn in a bunch of anima to the center of Seniston, and then you can just leave your Pontifex Shadow Ring in the bank, and then you get the stun negation effect on the melee slams. And the second thing I forgot to mention was that I have a Corrupt Slayer Helm on the stand in Anachronia, and I am on Slayer task for these kills. Alright, we have the preset loaded up and ready to go, so let's just go ahead and grab some adrenaline and go ahead and send it. And just for example's sake, I'll go ahead and use the tier 95 prayer over the T99 just because I know not everyone's going to have it at this gear level. So go ahead and start, surge, turn on our pocket slots, and then just to start the fight, I go ahead and surge again, walk one tile, drop a sun, target cycle a smoke cloud into a G-Conk, a D-breath, and I go ahead and hit overpower, or omnipower I mean. Another G-Conk into another couple abilities. Here I'll just go for an Asphyx underneath to avoid the attack. And just hit a wild magic, maybe another G-Conk. Go for a Nami here, just get some crit buff. Maybe hit attendees. Run under so he slams the same spot. That'll prevent the clone spawning on later phases. Hit our second Omni, maybe into a wild magic, and just kind of G-Conk spam. Be holding this fix underneath. Release the Detto with a D-breath. We get the skip? No, we're not going to get the skip. So if we get the lightning, just if it spawns close, you can just start trying to phase it immediately, and then surge once it's close enough. And we'll just wait here for the next phase. Go ahead and hit our time warp, start with a sun, do a couple basics. And we didn't have quite enough adren there for Nami as it was on cooldown, so we'll just run under for the Asphyx. If you limitless sigil under the effect of time warp, that gets reset because it's technically an ability. The only thing that doesn't really get reset here is the weapon specs. That's the only thing that really doesn't get reset by time warp. We'll just pop a couple abilities. We go for a 2-hit Asphyx here into a G-Staff. Another G-Kong, another G-Staff. I've not been paying attention to my Ripper. I don't use Ripper too often anymore. I probably should start using it more often, because I am not used to spamming it. But we'll just keep doing basics here. He's almost phase. Just build our adrenaline back up. Get him as close to 50k as we dare. Using some basic abilities. If you're taking a little bit of a punishing from the lightnings, that you miss one, then just go ahead and get a res. It doesn't matter too much on these phases. Don't forget to re-vuln, re-smoke cloud, time warp for a sun, and you do want to keep a 1-tick window in between your activating of or clicking of time warp and actually pressing the sunshine, or else it kind of bugs out. Just make sure to walk under, and for walking under, you usually want to use a channeled ability. Either G-Conk or Asphyx is going to work just fine. And that just holds you in place. If you try and use a regular ability underneath, you will walk out to the west. So that's just something to keep in mind. Maybe a G-Conk into a G-Staff here, another G-Staff. Messed up a little bit there on the run in and out, but on this phase it doesn't matter too much. I just usually do it to hold them in the same spot to make life a little bit easier. And now we're just going to wait for the lightning here. Maybe hit another Omnipower to get his HP down a bit. And just slowly build up our adrenaline. And here, I'm just going to look for the two that are connected here. And just kind of bladed dive over and surge around. Then I'll go ahead and wait for the other one. Just phase him as well. And then I'll go into the north one, hit my Vitpot, go into the middle, start putting some bleeds on the center guy. Time Warp Sun, toss a Vuln south. G-Conk, Wild Magic is fixed with a Limitless. Then another G-Conk into a G-Staff. Maybe another Wild Magic. G-Conk to another G-Staff. And that one's dead. It's important you kill this one before this guy goes up, or else, or this echo version of you goes up, or dies, I mean, because it causes less enrage overall from Kerapac. So I'm just going to toss Omni on this guy. We have quite a bit of food left over, so I can play a little bit more fun here. I can just start running over, and I'm actually going to grab a Divert on the way over. Divert's only like 20 mil, so feel free to use it. And I'm just going to start a Time Warp Sun. Use my A-Pot because I can. We go for a Nami, into a Devotion, hit Wild Magic, second Wild Magic into a G-Staff, and another G-Staff, just to try and really finish this guy off. Couldn't get the Devotion extension, so I Devotion just before he decided, or before we killed the Echo, so we got an extra 5 seconds on our Devotion. Probably should spam the Ripper a bit more. And just go ahead and go for the kill from here. We go for a Deado charge. Release it with a D-Breath. I'll go for a Disrupt Shield on this hit. Res this one. And you can go ahead and hit Debilitate after you go for a res, and that way the hits are pretty manageable. And before you know it, he is dead. Now, as you can see, didn't do anything fancy really there. The P4 was a little bit calculated, but honestly, most of that P1 through P3 was pretty much improv. As long as you go through and try and get on P1 2 Omni powers out and 2 wilds, 2-hit Asphyxes. Sometimes I let Asphyx play out if I'm just dual wield camping, although it's usually better just to 2-hit Asphyx or 3-tick Asphyx just so you can get more G-Conks out during your sun. And I just kind of follow those general principles and kind of improv a rotation. I don't do too many things as far as like specific basic orders and whatnot, just mainly making sure that I get G-Conk out every 3 or 4 abilities. Now, some of the mechanics that might not be too clear that I'm doing during the fight, the first special attack he does, if you don't walk under when he slams the staff down, he will make a line between himself and you and run it all the way out to the edge of the arena and put a time rift there. That'll hit you for like 400 to 800 typeless damage, and it's pretty annoying. Plus, it stuns you when that effect happens, and the stun effect and the magic hits from that effect all kind of compound on each other the later phases if you mess it up in P1, for example. So basically, to avoid everything from that attack, you just walk under him. You death dot under. There's no way for him to put the target onto himself or draw that line, so to speak, so it just cancels out the special attack. And the best way to hold yourself under a stationary target in this game is with a channeled ability like Greater Kong or Asphyx, or you can simply just not use an ability, walk under, wait for the slam, and then do it. Or once you really get comfortable with the boss, you can use any ability and just time your run through on tick, and that'll work just fine. For the slams, the melee slams, the reason I run in and out like I do is just to make sure he keeps slamming that same tile on himself. This prevents those golden clones or echoes from spawning and giving you additional melee hits on the later phases. It's not the most ideal as far as pure speed is concerned. However, it is definitely effective in keeping everything chill and relaxed. And then for the lightning wall, it's pretty straightforward. The big thing to know about the lightning wall is that the actual hitbox is kind of shifted 1 or 2 tiles in front of the visual of the lightning. And what do I mean by this is it may look like you just barely escaped the lightning if you wait too long, but the hitbox has already been clobbering you. Whereas if you stand slightly behind the lightning, you can actually stand on the tile, I believe, inside of the back of the lightning animation, and you won't actually get hit. Think of ED3 Ambassador during the Roomba phase. The hitbox of those beams that shoot out and basically nuke you, they are not exactly where the visual tells you, so it is just something to keep in mind. So to quickly recap what I was doing on phase 4, there's the 3 versions of yourself, and then there's the 3 echoes in the north, the west, and the south. south. And what you can do is on start go into the north one, or if you want to the south one and mirror it, it doesn't really matter. But essentially what you're doing is vitpotting the copy of yourself, then going into a different one. The copy of yourself will then stay at that remaining HP. The vitpot doesn't wear out on it. And then you can go into, say, the center one and then run to the south here and then kill these two echoes before the one that you vitpotted up here actually falls over, keeping this echo focused on the copy of yourself rather than you actually sitting down in this area. And what I personally like to do is go into the western one here, or the middle one, so to speak, and then I run south and attack the southern one, because the southern one is going to be focused on the southern clone. So you only have this one echo attacking you plus Kerapac's autos, but on this beginning portion of phase 4, Kerapac's autos are not going to be doing too much damage because nothing has died yet. The thing that makes Kerapac really angry is each of the echoes that are dying and each of the copies of you that are dying. That increases his enrage and makes the auto attack damage go through the moon. So before the copy of myself or the copy of you dies in the south, you want to kill the southern echo because it'll allow that copy to teleport, thus not dying, thus not adding, I believe it's 25 stacks or maybe it's 50 stacks of enrage. It's not a ridiculous amount, but it definitely is helpful. And then afterwards, I'll just use the remaining bit of my sun. As you saw from the sunshine, it's pretty straightforward. I just do a basic like G-Conk and then I hit Limitless and go for a wild magic and an Asphyx. I understand Limitless is very expensive right now, so hopefully you're able to just do some Slayer tasks and save up for it if you don't have it right now. But Limitless is very strong specifically for Kerapac. But anyways, I digress. I used a Wild Magic and Asphyx and a G-Conk under Limitless on the southern guy, and then it procs, and then I get my 100% back. I get all my cooldowns back. And as you saw, just attack the middle one. If you surge from this point here to this point here, you surge diagonally. What can happen and what does happen more often than not is Kerapac will send an auto when you're here, and then he will send one here, and basically what happens is the auto that's here has a set travel time, and then when he has an auto that he sends here, it has a set travel time, and then basically both of those hits are going to hit you on tick. So that's typically why I just recommend running over if you're not going for the world's fastest budget kills, and it allows you to deal with the auto attacks individually rather than having them all stack up. And then from that point, I'll just drop a Time Warp Sun. I try and use Devotion on either ability number 3 or 4 during the Time Warp. If you do your Time Warp properly and you don't miss any ticks on your global cooldowns, you should be able to get 5 abilities off before it resets. And that 5th ability will get reset. That's why sometimes if you see people killing Kerapac, they might use something like Omni Power on their 5th, and then that very same game tick, it all resets, and then it looks like they didn't press Omni at all, and they use it a second time. And also you want to use your Devotion somewhere in that Time Warp so you can Devotion again afterwards. Ideally, you want to press it as late as possible, just so you can try and fit this Echo kill in, because with every target that you kill, up to 2 targets, it will give an extra 5 seconds on your Devotion timer. So when maximizing it, what you can try and do is get your Devotion off during your Time Warp, kill the Echo so you have a 15-second Devotion instead of 10, and then when that runs out, you can go ahead and use Devotion again while killing Kerapac, and you have a total of 25 seconds of Devotion. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, before I ramble on too much longer about this boss and just kind of go on a tangent, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up the video here. If you're still watching and you found this guide helpful, if you're in a clan Discord or you have some friends that are trying to learn it, or you're learning with others, feel free to share these guides. The more views these guides get, the more it helps me in return, and the more views and whatnot and shares and engagement and all of that fancy YouTube stuff that these videos get, the more inclined I am to start making more of them more often. So if you did find this helpful, feel free to share it around with people who may need it. Anyways though, let's go ahead and roll that outro. Ladies, gentlemen, and I did not forget about you Ripper Demons, thank you very much for watching. Your viewership is greatly appreciated. Have a wonderful morning, evening, afternoon, nighttime, whatever it is, wherever you are, and I will see you next time for the next guide. Peace.